Well, good morning. My name's Marcus. I'd normally be found in Wycliffe's warehouse congregation. And thank you to Sue, also a member there, for reading Psalm 13 for us. As you listened to the psalm, it was probably readily apparent that the writer was in some distress. And of course, recent events with the coronavirus have rather multiplied the reasons that we might be experiencing distress. But even without that, life has a habit of bringing distress our way. So the topic for this morning's talk is, where is God when it hurts? So how should we respond when it hurts? I grew up in a Christian household, and the Christian culture around me was really rather suspicious of emotions. There were exclusion clauses, fruits of the spirit kind of things were okay, joy and peace. But for the rest of it, it kind of suggested that your attention was slipping from where it should be on God, and that you were getting a little bit over-interested in yourself and this irrelevant life here and now. So the suggestion there really was brush it aside, get on with the stuff that matters. Of course, other people might take a very different approach and say that we should be able to experience joy and happiness and peace at all times, because if we have the right kind of faith, God's going to step in and fix everything. The diseases will get healed, the money will shower in, everything will be fine. Well, I don't think either of those are particularly useful. The first one denies that we're made in God's image and that our emotions are real. And the second one, well, life just proves that wrong pretty quickly. The best Christians, the ones with the most amazing faith, can go through really hard times, and it doesn't just get fixed. So let's have a look at this psalm and see if we can find some better ideas. So you see, I've split the psalm up into three distinct sections, and it seems to me the writer of the psalm is calling us to reflect on three very distinct things, to acknowledge three things. Let's look at the top section first, and I'll read the words to you again. How long, Lord, will you forget me forever? How long will you hide your face from me? How long must I wrestle with my thoughts and day after day have sorrow in my heart? How long will my enemy triumph over me? This is raw emotion. This is real. This is pain. There's no attempt to sugarcoat things here, and no attempt to pretend everything's okay really. So I'm calling this first section, Acknowledge Our Distress. So the advice from the writer of this psalm is to acknowledge pain and distress, not to shy away from it, not to try and think it away with clever thoughts, not to brush it aside too quickly, but to pause and be honest that it's real, to feel it. And of course that applies to ourselves, but it also applies to how we interact with other people. And sometimes we can be too quick to want to move people on to the better feelings. You're going through a hard time now, but... And it's not just the writer of this psalm who is honest in this way. The Bible is full of characters who had a hard time and were willing to be honest about it. And we're going to look at some of those now in the form of a quiz. So it seems to be the thing at the moment to play online quizzes in this lockdown life. So here's the very cheerful Bruised and Battered in the Bible quiz. You're going to see a short biography about some characters in the Bible who had a hard time with a quote from the Bible about them or from them. For each one, you just need to guess the identity of the character, and you can play along by just thinking about it or perhaps writing the answer down, or if you're up to the technology, you can put your answer in the chat bar, but please just write it ready to send, but don't send it until you're told to do so, because hey, it's never popular to shout the answer out during a quiz. So I'll read out the text as well as it being on the screen in case anybody finds it hard to see what's written there. So, first question. This character was described as a very righteous man who obeyed God's laws, but their life became full of suffering. They lost all the members of their family and all their possessions. They became very ill, with terrible sores all over their body. And the quote, "Instead of eating, I mourn, and I can never stop groaning. Everything I fear and dread comes true. I have no peace, no rest, and my troubles never end." So what is their name? Take a moment to have a think. If you have an answer, get it ready to send in the chat bar, but don't send it yet. and send your answer if you've got one. So the correct answer is Job. So question 2 coming up. This character started life as a shepherd, but became very important. For one part of their life, they had to live on the run as someone was hunting them down to kill them. He made some very bad choices, which he experienced great guilt over. 2 of his sons died. And the quote, "The water is up to my neck. I'm sinking in deep mud. There's no solid ground. I'm out in deep water, and the waves are about to drown me. I'm worn out for calling for help, and my throat is aching." So, what is their name? Do you know? Take a moment to have a think. If you've got an answer, and you can, stick it in the chat bar ready to send. And send your answer now. And the correct answer there is David. So, question 3. This character was a prophet who performed some famous miracles. They had to challenge some rulers about their evil behaviour, and as a result, they were hated, and their life was threatened. And the quote, "He stopped and sat down in the shade of a tree and wished he would die. 'It's too much, Lord,' he prayed. 'Take away my life, I might as well be dead.'" So what is their name? Have a think. If you've got an idea, stick it in the chat bar ready to send. And send it now. Correct answer is Elijah. 4th question. So this character had a group of followers who he was very close to, but one of them betrayed him. Another one denied even knowing him. People made up lies about him to get him in trouble. He was whipped and then killed. And a quote, "The sorrow in my heart is so great that it almost crushes me." What is their name? A moment to make your mind up. Stick your answer in the chat bar if you can, ready to send. And send your answers. Correct answer is Jesus. So, 5th question. This character travelled widely, telling people the good news about Jesus, but he was often rejected and treated very badly as a result, including being beaten, stoned, and imprisoned. And a quote, "I have been hungry and thirsty. I have often been without enough food, shelter, or clothing. Every day I'm under the pressure of my concern for all the churches. When someone is weak, then I feel weak too, and when someone is led into sin, I am filled with distress." What is their name? Do you know this character? Take a moment to have a think. If you have an answer, get it ready in the chat bar. And send your answers. So the correct answer is Paul. Right, final question coming up. I don't know if anybody's got 5 out of 5 so far, but I've saved the hardest one for the last question, so see how you get on. Right, this character was the wife of a man who had 2 wives. The other wife had children, but this character had none, and as a result she was treated like she was less valuable, and the other wife made her life a misery. And the quote, "One time after they had finished their meal in the house of the Lord, she got up. She was deeply distressed, and she cried bitterly." What is her name? Maybe it's rattling around somewhere in the depths of your brain. A moment to try and bring it to mind. So if you've got an answer, get it ready in the chat bar. And send those answers. And the correct answer is Hannah. So, well done to anybody who got 6 out of 6. Maybe you want to post your score in the chat bar. Well, that's other people. But what about you? What's going on in your life at the moment? What sources of distress are there, if any? In a few moments, we're going to take a minute to pause and reflect on that, to be real and to feel. Maybe you want to do that just thinking in your mind, or maybe you want to grab a piece of paper and a pen and jot some things down to think more about later and to be honest with to other people or with God in the same way as the writer of the psalm. You can also use the chat bar to the side if you feel able to do the technology there, and other people might see your distress and pray for you. I guess we should just say that if the source of your distress in some way relates to somebody else in a way that could embarrass or upset them, then this probably isn't the right way to share it. We'll turn our attention back to the psalm now and see what other advice the writer has for us. Look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes, or I will sleep in death. So we see the writer of the psalm here having acknowledged his distress and in no way pretending that it isn't real or doesn't matter, turning his attention to something else and acknowledging a second thing, which is his need for God. He says, look on me and answer, Lord my God. Give light to my eyes. I need to see. And so I'm calling this second section, Acknowledge Our Need. I have no doubt that the writer of the psalm would dearly have loved for God to come in and sweep away every source of difficulty and suffering. But in the second part of this psalm, we see him cry out in the midst of those difficulties and needs about a different need, a deeper need. It's gone dark for him, and he cries to God to come and bring light to his eyes. He wants to see again. And clearly what he wants to see is God himself. It is God who is his greatest need. Elsewhere in the Psalms we read this. O God, you are my God, and I long for you. My whole being desires you. Like a dry, worn-out and waterless land, my soul is thirsty for you. Let me see you in the sanctuary. Let me see how mighty and glorious you are. Your constant love is better than life itself, and so I will praise you. The truth is that God made us to know him and to be with him. We are his children. And so just as for the writer of the psalm, our greatest need is for God himself. Of course we have many other needs. Those needs are real and undeniable. But beneath them all lies that most fundamental of needs. We can meet all of those other needs, but if our need for God remains unmet, then we remain in need. And it is that need that God promises to meet. He doesn't promise to remove the suffering and difficulty of this life, but he does promise us himself when we cry out to him. In a moment, I have a prayer that we can pray together, so where we can reflect on that need. So take a moment to have a look at the prayer. There's a couple of points where you might like to fill in the things you've been thinking about. I'm going to read it through. Please do pray along with me if you want to pray it. And I'll pause at those points so that you can put in your own words to God. Let's pray. Father God, you know the things that distress me. The pain is real, and I long for things to change. But as well as those longings, and deeper than them, I long for you. be with me. Let me feel the comfort of your love, your acceptance of me, your presence with me, and my place in your family. You are my life. Let's turn our eyes one last time to the psalm and see what else the writer of the psalm has for us. But I trust in your unfailing love. My heart rejoices in your salvation. I will sing the Lord's praise, for he has been good to me. And so, having acknowledged his distress, his pain, the reality of it, and then turning to acknowledge his need for God, to see God, for God to be with him, our writer now turns to acknowledge something else, and that is the truth. The beautiful, wonderful, reassuring truth of who God is, his unfailing love and his salvation. And not only that, but also his knowledge of what God has done in his life. And so I'm calling this final part, Acknowledge the Truth. The truth is that we have a forgiving, merciful, loving, faithful God who longs to be with us, who doesn't forget us when we forget him, whether we feel that truth or not. It is most perfectly revealed, of course, in Jesus, who lived and died and took the worst that we could throw at him to win us back to him and to open the door to that. And when we killed him, cried, Father, forgive, they don't know what they do. Of course, it's not always easy to keep the truth in mind, and so the writer of the psalm proclaims the truth to himself, reminds himself of the truth. God is not right in front of us, and I think it's especially hard at this time, isn't it? I'm sure like me, so many of you are finding that in spite of this kind of thing, which is great and we appreciate it, our experience of our faith and of church and of worship, it's just a bit flat somehow. And in the midst of difficulties, the truth can ebb away. So how do we keep that truth in mind? Well, maybe we can look and think a little bit about how we keep the truth of the love and goodness of other people in mind when they're not with us. At this time, of course, we have been separated from many of those we love. So take a moment to think, what is it that we do to keep the truth about others alive to us? Well, I wonder what you came up with, and I wonder if any of it could be useful in keeping the flame of the truth about God burning brightly in our hearts and minds. Maybe you thought of phone calls and video chats, and of course we can spend time talking to God in prayer. Maybe you thought of physical objects or pictures, and it could be that having something that we carry around with us during the day, that when we touch it or see it, just sparks a special thought about God. Maybe you thought of a special song, and as Christians we often spend time singing worship, and that's taken a tumble recently. We often do that mostly in the context of church services, so maybe we need to look for other ways of joining in with worship. Maybe you thought of memories, special times shared with a person, a time where they revealed a great quality or their love for us. And it's great to look back and think of the things God has done in our life. Maybe it's good to write those down and have a book of memories that we can turn to when things get a bit dark and the truth fades. And of course, there's writing, emails and letters, and as Christians we have the Bible. I could spend a bunch of time reading all kinds of bits of the Bible to you now which express great truths about God, but instead I've pulled some together as a document that you can download. Maybe you've already done that if you got the link in an email before the service and have been colouring it in. But I'll put the link up when I finish in a moment. It's only be there for a little bit, but I'm sure you can find your way back to it after the service. And it's also down in the information about the service. You can just print it off, decorate it how you wish, and maybe pin things up around the place just to keep the truth alive. So the psalmist advises us to acknowledge distress, to feel pain, not to shy away or pretend it doesn't exist. and to tell God about it honestly. And then amidst all the needs that brings, to cry out to God about our greatest need, our need for God himself. And then to feast on the truth that the God that we need loves us, forgives us, longs to be with us, chases after us, has done everything necessary for us to be with him. A glorious truth to keep in mind.